Let's go ahead and call this meeting of the Nacogdoches Planning and Zoning Commission to order. And please stand with me and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We start every meeting with an open forum. In addition to public comment on the specific agenda items. And so if you do have comment on one of the specific items, you may want to wait for that item. But this is a opportunity for citizens to comment on governance issues over which the city of Nacogdoches and our commission have domain. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the commission are not permitted to discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics which are not posted as an agenda item. All speakers should address all comments to the commission and limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. Do we have anyone who'd like to speak in the open forum? Nope? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the commission and will be enacted by one motion. These items include final plats where staff has found compliance with all minimum subdivision regulations. All items approved by consent are approved with any and all staff recommendations. Since there will not be separate discussion of these items, citizens wishing to address the commission regarding one or more items on the consent agenda may address the commission at this time as well. If any commissioner desires to discuss an item on the consent agenda, it may be moved to the regular agenda for further consideration. The only item on the consent agenda are the approval of the minutes. Anyone want to comment on the minutes? Hope not. Okay, good. And has everyone had a chance to review them? Anyone have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
What's the motion?
Just to approve the minutes.
You still second that?
Whenever she make the motion.
All right. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, made it. All right, on to the next item. This is number 5 on the regular agenda. Not city council, but the Planning and Zoning Commission will receive staff recommendations and public input on the following items, may deliberate and take formal action on each item. We had nothing removed from the consent agenda, so the only other item is a public hearing, which is approval or considering an approval of a zone change from R1 single family to R4 multifamily for approximately 0.3 acres, being Lot 1, Block 3 of the Bonita subdivision located at 1905 Pearl Street. This request has been submitted by Mario Wesley, and it is case file ZON 2022-05.
All right, thank you. City Planner?
It's not on.
No.
All right, thank you. Elena Helton, City Planner. This is a 0.3 acre property located in the Bonita subdivision. It is an existing single-family development built in 1965. as well as the other single-family homes located along this section of Pearl Street. The property is zoned R1 Single Family, and the request is for R4 Multifamily. This area does include a mix of zoning and development types. The properties fronting directly onto Pearl Street primarily are zoned and developed as single-family. And these homes were built in the late 1960s, mid-1970s. There's also some multifamily zoning and existing development. The River Oaks Apartments, which is located just to the west of the property, was built back in the 1970s. The Bonita Creek Apartments, which is located northwest and fronts onto West College Street, was built in the 80s. And then you have Ellington Court Apartments that's built farther east along Ellington, and that was built in about 2013. And then farther north along Pearl, you have some duplexes and triplexes, so the area does include a mix of uses, but this section of Pearl Street primarily is single-family fronting onto Pearl. The applicant has stated that they intend to maintain the existing residence on the property and build a duplex on the backside. And so looking at a request, we always look at the worst-case scenario. If the property were to fully redevelop under the proposed zoning, what that would look like. And so if the property were, if the existing home were demolished and the property were to be redeveloped, you could get up to 2 duplex structures or 4 units based on the size of the lot. If they were to redevelop the property as a straight multifamily, they could get up to 9 units in a multiplex depending on parking and landscaping and so on so forth. So just to give you an idea of what could potentially be built under that current zoning. And so while a duplex development wouldn't necessarily have an impact on the adjacent properties, and multifamily wouldn't have an impact on the neighborhood as a whole, a multifamily development could impact the adjacent neighbors who are directly across the street or next door to the property. But the density would not significantly impact the overall neighborhood. The future land use plan does identify the property as single family, and single family is identified as your traditional detached single family dwellings. It does include duplex. That rural development that you see to the west is primarily due to Bonita Creek and the floodplain in that area. So you'll see a lot of our natural areas with that future land use designation simply because of those natural resources. Now, this request does further some of the land use policies that are outlined in the comprehensive plan, including infill and providing affordable housing in a walkable environment in close proximity to community resources like retail and SFA and things of that nature. So while it doesn't conform to the future land use plan, it does fulfill and further some of those land use policies that are outlined in the comprehensive plan. These are some images of the subject property. So you're actually standing at the intersection of Pearl Street and Ellington. When you're looking at the photo in the upper left-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner, again, that's just a closer view as you're standing on Ellington facing the property. And this is where the property takes direct access. So it faces Pearl Street, but the driveway is off of Ellington, and Ellington dead ends into that River Oaks apartment complex. This is the view standing at the property, looking north and then south along Pearl Street. These are some photos of the homes in the area. So the blue home on the upper right-hand corner is just north of the property. The brick home in the upper left-hand corner, that's just south of the property, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the character of the single-family development that's in the area. These are some photos of Ellington. So you're standing at the property and you're looking east and west, and you can see the apartment complexes in your view. As part of the notification process, we did send 12 written notices to property owners within 200 feet. We also sent notices to property owners within 500 feet. And in addition, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting. So on April 27th, the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting at the Parks and Recreation Center. Staff facilitated that meeting. We sent postcards to all the property owners within 500 feet. And we did have 2 residents who own property within that 200-foot buffer area actually come to the meeting. And Mr. Brendan Rowell, he lives at 1911 Pearl Street. He lives immediately north of the subject property. He's the next door neighbor of the property owner. Mr. Gary Woods, he lives 1839. He lives 2 houses down on Pearl Street on the west side. So those 2 residents did attend the meeting. Mr. Rowell was supportive of the request. Mr. Woods did have some concerns about the request setting precedent for other properties in the area, changing in zoning to multifamily. And we did talk about the characteristics of this property and how it was uniquely situated based on some of the other single-family lots that are mid-block. And so staff didn't see immediate concern for some of these other properties transitioning to multifamily. But if that were to occur, then we would take a more comprehensive look at the overall neighborhood and look at the direction that the development is going and do a more comprehensive evaluation at that time. But this property is uniquely situated. It is oversized for some of the lots in the area. It is located at the terminus of Ellington Street, excuse me, at the River Oaks apartment complex. And so it's not mid-block and in the middle of some of these other single-family homes. And so staff does find that it could be compatible with the adjacent land uses. But we did understand Mr. Wood's concern, and those residents are also in attendance. We also received a written letter from Mrs. Bonnie Tube. She lives at 1917 Pearl Street. She is 2 houses north of the subject property. So she submitted a letter in opposition with concerns about traffic and overcrowding and some of the common concerns that you see whenever we see an increase in density. And we also received another letter from Mr. Brian Davis. Now, we didn't get that till after the packet was published, so we put a copy of it at your place. And this was the same property owner who submitted a written letter when this property was requesting a variance a few months ago to lot size in an attempt to subdivide the property. So in the letter, you'll see that their comments actually state that the lot is too small to be subdivided. I think that's because in the previous request, they were proposing a subdivision. And we did call Mr. Davis to try to reach out and clarify what the request was, but we weren't able to get a hold of him. And he is the property owner / property management rep for Bonita Creek Apartments to the north. We did do a calculation to see if these 2 properties together combined equal 20% of that 200-foot buffer area, which would trigger the rule that requires city council majority vote to approve the request. And these 2 combined is just about 13%. So that was a question, and we wanted to make sure we clarified that for the commission. So staff does find that the request meets the approval criteria as far as compatibility. We do acknowledge that the potential increase in density could have a negative impact to the direct neighbors, but for the neighborhood overall, wouldn't have a significant impact. And while it doesn't comply with the future land use plan, it does fulfill a number of those land use policies that are outlined in the comprehensive plan. I know that the applicant and property owner are in attendance, and some of the residents are also in attendance, and they'd like to address the commission, but at this time, we'll go ahead and conclude staff's presentation and open it up for questions from the commission.
Any questions for Ms. Hilton?
I don't have any particular questions.
Mhm.
Help me on these, Elena. These are R4, these are not.
Yes, so there's the zoning map and then the future land use map. So what you see on your screen, that's a zoning map. So the colors are similar in the future land use. Yellow is single family in the zoning map, but it's also yellow on the comprehensive plan future land use map. So in the zoning map, R4 is that kind of dark brown maroon color. Purple is commercial. And then when you look at the future land use comprehensive plan, the green is rural because of that floodplain, and the purple is commercial. So this is that visual representation, kind of big picture view of how an area should develop over time, while the zoning actually enables what can be built today on the property. But some of the colors are similar from the zoning to the future land use categories. I hope that helped clarify. All right, you're welcome.
Do you have any idea what the current occupancy is on the, I think it's River Oaks Apartments at the end of Ellington Street?
Oh, as far as how many units they have occupied, I do not. I know that right now, as far as occupancy, it's at a kind of all-time high, just generally across the city.
Okay. Probably the same thing with the Bonita Creek. Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Hilton? Okay, well, we'll open it up for public hearing, public comment, I should say. And if the applicant, owner, or any other interested party would like to come up and speak on this, please step up to the mic and introduce yourself with your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Milton Mora. For 23 years, lived at 1811 Pearl, which is 5 houses south of this particular, on the same side of the street. But for about 45 years, I've been trying to get the city planning department to help me. It's been a continuous battle with zero results. And I've dealt with a lot of you people maybe don't know the previous city planners, but I've worked with Scott Ingalls, Aaron Culhavy, Larissa Philpott, and Leo Manley. I haven't worked with Alina on this thing, but for about 45 years, it's been zero assistance from them in trying to keep our little neighborhood, especially our block. That's all I could work with. In compliance with R1. And so over the years, Alina talked about mixed use and all that. It's certainly been developed, it's certainly come about as the lack of enforcement of zoning. And so I've had no help for 45 years. But anyhow, I raised my children there. I lived there for 23 or 24 years. I raised my children there. We don't need a zone change over there. I've been dealing with this for, like I said, 45 years, and we need the neighborhood to be improved, but not in the manner that we're looking at here. I have ideas about solutions to problems and all that, but I think it's getting beyond the scope of this meeting unless you want me to get the thing. But anyhow, I'm opposed to it, and I think it would be better for our neighborhood there for it to stay like it is. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moore, before you
Yes,
go
sir.
back, just a question.
Sure.
What issues with non-compliance with R1 zoning have you witnessed in that area?
Realtors selling people homes with no, whether they tell them and explain to them thoroughly what R1 is and what they're buying a property in that. Larissa Philpott, I remember at one of the city commission meetings, told Mr. Van Horn, the mayor, and all of them, that it was too difficult to pursue these investigations of the individual homes. They were Larissa was having to go, it's my understanding, to knock on the door, talk to many of them were students. The property owners weren't held responsible. It was the renter that they would talk to, and she said it was too difficult, and they agreed with her. So that's just one thing but it's just a lack of having some rules, but they're not enforced, you know.
So mainly it's students living in
A lot
what are
of them
supposed
are.
to be a single-family
A lot of
house?
them are.
Okay.
They certainly are. So,
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Moore before you?
thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
My name's Gary Woods, and I live at 221 Ellington. It's confusing because I own 2 houses. My homestead last year was at 1839, which is barely within the realm. And we had, at the other meeting, you had the star on the wrong lot from me. Yeah, but you've got stale information, 1 year stale, and when I moved my homestead, you didn't pick up 221 Ellington. But that's where I actually live now, which is cattywampus from the house that you're talking about. The other house is 2 houses south, 1839, that's where my son lives. You have a thankless job, and I should know because for the last 41 plus years, I've been the tax assessor, collector, and the chief appraiser at the appraisal district. And I recognize the thankless job when I see one. I have a prepared written document because if I don't, I will get off schedule and ramble. So I'm going to give you a copy. You can pass it, you can follow along with me. timed this, it was a little over 3 minutes, but with me up here in front of everybody, it might take me a little longer. Good evening. Again, my name is Gary Woods. I live at 221 Ellington Street, which is diagonally across the street from 1905 Pearl Street. We moved into the house on Ellington Street in 1958 when I was 5 years old. I also own 1839 Pearl Street, which is the residence of my son. It is 2 houses south of 1905 Pearl Street. When we first moved into the house on Ellington Street, Pearl Street was dirt and ended at Star, didn't go all the way through. The house at 1905 Pearl was built around 1965, and I recall watching the house being built. I was 12 years old. At this time, there were only 3 houses on the west side of Pearl between Ellington and Rusk. There were 2 houses on the east side of Pearl Street between Ellington and Rusk. On the west side of Pearl Street between Ellington and College, there were 4 houses, including 1905 Pearl. I've seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood over my lifetime, and I can name almost everyone who lived in the neighborhood. 2 of us are still there, those being myself and John L. Sharp. We're very familiar with the area around us, and if you drive north on Pearl from College Street, where the zoning is not R1, you will see a noticeable difference in the neighborhoods from the upkeep of the houses to the number of cars parked in the yards. The same is true if you drive south on Pearl Street from Rusk to Star. If you drive anywhere on Bonita Street, you will see a stark difference in the upkeep of the structures and yards, including number of vehicles parked the entire length of Bonita Street. My point is not to be negative about rental properties, but rather to seek to keep the integrity of Pearl Street from Rusk to College intact. The primary effect between what you will see is that the cause of the difference is the zoning, the difference between R1 zoning and R2 or higher. Please respect and help maintain this integrity by denying the zone change request. To date, we have not seen any drawings or diagrams of what is proposed to be built. We've heard duplexes mentioned, as well as the possibility of a 2-story structure. Another person mentioned that the owner wants to build a structure for a family member, and another person mentioned the owner wants to build a structure for secondary income. To date, we do not know what the real plan entails. Thus begs the question, why go all the way to R4? Why not just go to R2 to accommodate the current need? The city planner said at the informal hearing at the rec center that because the lot backs up to an R4 property, they recommended changing the lot to R4, so the city would benefit in increased property tax revenue. The best way for the city to benefit from continued tax revenue would be to maintain the R1 zoning, so the property values of the area would continue to appreciate due to the maintenance and upkeep of the existing properties as single-family dwellings, as opposed to the distressed values that you're seeing on Pearl Street south of Rusk and the properties north of College, as well as the entire length of Bonita Street. On a side note, my biggest fear is once this entire lot becomes R4, it will have the tendency to move laterally along Pearl Street using the city's point of view that the change is appropriate because the subject lot is already adjacent to an R4 property. Due to the fact that it's not the owner's primary residence and she could decide to move back home, this would allow the owner to leave the residence facing Pearl, move out, then rent the brick house to 4 or 5 college kids, instead of just the structure she builds behind her house. Then the rest of Pearl Street may become subject to change that would truly be detrimental. If you choose to allow the change from R1 to R4, I respectfully request that in some form or fashion, you restrict the existing structure from facing Pearl Street from being included in the zone change in order to protect those remaining homes facing Pearl. And this makes me very uncomfortable because I've never spoken out against something. And I hope you understand that I never have done this because this is not easy for me. To prove one point, here's a picture of me and my brother painting a a swing set. I'm about 8. Pearl Street is dirt, and across from us, the entire length was a pasture. This is a current picture of the same location. So I've seen lots of changes. And with that, I would answer any questions if you have any questions of me. I will autograph those if you want one for a keepsake.
Were you paid for this
Heaven,
labor?
that was about 1959. I don't think anybody got paid for a paint swing set.
Well, I think we had child labor laws.
No, I got fed.
If you need an attorney, let me know. Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Woods?
Yep, but we do appreciate you coming to speak to
Thank
us.
you.
How y'all doing? My name is Mario Wesley, and I'm assisting the homeowner in trying to develop this piece of property on Pearl Street. This is a unique piece of property, which, as you can see from the map, that it has road frontage both on Pearl and also road frontage on Ellington Street on the side, and also is touching multifamily. So the proposal that we're making is not out of the realm of the neighborhood, because this back portion of the property is actually touching a very large multifamily section in the neighborhood that, so the identity of the neighborhood would not change, and everything should flow as it is as of right now. Because if you can see on the map, just what is that, east of the property, there is two lots that has been spot zoned for R4. And we're not requesting any change like that to make an island of a R4. We're just requesting the portion of the back of this property, or this property is touching, to be R4 to allow for just a single duplex unit, which basically will be just one unit downstairs and one unit upstairs. And so it'll just be 2 additional units in this area. And like I said, the lot is oversized, which is big enough to accommodate the additional structure. There will be minimum traffic flow. There will be minimum effect on traffic flow in the neighborhood with the added structure. And also coming out on Ellington Street, once you enter Pearl Street, there is a stop sign right there. So this section right here is traffic controlled. And also the neighboring, the immediate neighbor to this property, which is touching to the north, he is here today, and he's also in support of this zone change. And we don't see a domino effect happening in the neighborhood, because if you look at properties to the north of this property, none of them are having the ability to add multifamily. So none is sectioned on or have access to 2 streets like this one is. And none of them have the ability to be able to add another unit behind it, because they don't have the access or don't have the ability to add that on the properties. And also, I was just going to note that, you know, I'm a property manager here in town, and just right now I think we manage over 250 properties, in which we're right now working in a negative. So basically, anybody that we got that comes into the office that needs a house, we basically are telling them we're looking at dates in which other people are moving out and signing leases for future dates. And so basically there is an extreme need for properties here in Nacogdoches, and these type of housing can house entry-level teachers, nurses, firefighters, anybody that's just starting out. This will be a nice housing for them, in addition to college students. But just as of right now, I mean, we're not having the inventory or anything like that to be able to accommodate population growth or student growth or anything like that. If there was any type of new industry or anything happening in Nacogdoches, I'm not sure how the housing will be able to accommodate that. But I think this is, you know, a common sense, change that would have minimum effect on the ability of the neighborhood to stay the same and really would not be noticeable to anybody around other than, you know, seeing an extra structure right there. And then on this one, you know, basically the owner lives in the house right in the front. So this is not like a total investor that has a whole lot that they're investing on the whole lot. She's actually living in the house house in front of it. So we don't see her, you know, putting anything in there that's gonna be detrimental, because she's gonna be the one that's directly affected by that also. And then, so, I mean, and just to, you know, just to answer Mr. Moore and Mr. Woods, I mean, any neighborhood or any community, you know, we got to have some type of common sense changes to that neighborhood, and not necessarily changing the identity of the neighborhood, but new houses got to be built, new structures got to be built to accommodate additional population growth in any neighborhood. So if someone like SFA just adds 50 students, you know, at some point those 50 students can live off campus, and where are they going to live? So if we saying no to any type of common sense structures being built or anything like that, only thing you're going to create is more of the issues that you say that you already have, in which multiple college students are crowding up in one house. Instead of, they can be spread out over town in different structures, or we can just, you know, like I said, we can just do like we've been doing, not building anything, and just having multiple college students just crowd up in houses because they can't find housing. Oh, is there any questions? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Shannon.
You said the property owner lives in front, or the property owner lives at 1905?
Yes, she lives at 1905, and I'm just saying that the structure that we're trying to build will be in her basically backyard.
Do you know how long that property owner's lived at that residence?
She's right here. I'm sorry. 2 years.
Thank you. So one other question, you talked about sub-zoning this lot. Are you saying you want to sub-zone, partially zone the lot, or you want
No,
the
I think
entire loan?
I think the rules will require on the zoning change, it would have to apply for the whole lot.
Just making sure I was on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Wesley, if you want to build a duplex as opposed to an apartment structure, is there a reason that you couldn't do that with R2 zoning or R3 zoning as opposed to R4?
It's just on our research, we just looked at people are more inclined, or cities are more inclined to zone something that's closely related to where it's at. Now, you don't have enough space to build an apartment, and we don't build big apartments. These are just small structures, but we just thought it'd be more uniform as far as to the map to be touching, instead of having a spot with a different color than having, and so we're just trying to basically match what's right there already in the backyard as far as zoning wise, that would still allow us to build what we was wanting to build.
Are you guys, sorry, Ruth, are you, okay. Are you guys planning on building something that looks like a mother-in-law suite that's 2 stories? And what do you think about parking in terms of your residents that would be parking back there? How would that look for you?
Yeah.
Because it's on 0.3 acres of a lot.
Yeah, I thought I gave this out at the community meeting. We didn't look at this at the community meeting? Okay. So I know Mr. Woods said that he haven't seen it, but I thought we'd seen it at the community meeting. You didn't see it up there? Okay. But I guess y'all can pass around this. I only got one. You know, like I said, it's not like a mother-in-law suite, but it's gonna be a unit on the downstairs, a unit upstairs. So it's not very big, but it's just a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
What is the square footage of that unit?
I'm sorry, he got it on there. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's on.
Do you want to tell?
Yeah, I can. Want me to read that out to him?
Sure, absolutely.
Should have ran copies for everybody, but okay, the total living area will be 1732. So basically, it'll be 867 square feet each unit.
What's the current square footage of the house?
Of the,
Existing?
know nobody's mic.
None of your mics work.
I know. 2,000.
The
Okay.
lot's roughly 15,000 square feet,
The existing home is approximately 2,000 square feet,
and the lot is roughly
13,000 square feet.
13,000.
Yes. No, sorry, so the square footage of the home, that 2,000 square feet does include the garage. So it's about 1,700 square feet of living area, about 400 square feet of garage.
And here's a rough,
Can you give that other one, do you mind sharing that other one, Mr.
Yeah.
Weston, just so they can get perspective?
I think I got one more I can turn down here.
Thank you. I do have another question in terms of rental. Are you planning on doing long-term rentals, or are you just doing something like an Airbnb for short-term rentals?
Now, we usually do at least for a year,
Okay,
and then they can renew at that point, but no Airbnb.
Would you have space for, I would assume, 4 parking spaces?
Yes, ma'am.
It's 2 bedrooms, you're gonna potentially have 2, you could have 4
Yes,
people in each apartment.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, and on that site plan, they kinda got it sketched on there, also the, parking on there. Yes, ma'am.
So I think what I'm hearing from some of the people in opposition is, once it's R4, you can build whatever the lot will allow as far as multifamily. I'm not saying you're gonna build a 20-story building or something, but you might be able to build 8 or 9 unit small apartment building there, which would really change the character of that area. I'm guessing the economics of that probably don't make sense, though.
No, I mean, the size and anything doesn't really make sense on doing anything more than what we got on those plans to build. I mean, it's just no way to build anything larger than what we got on there.
Is it a parking issue or a?
I mean, if you put that many in there, I mean, it'll make a lot of issues. It'll be the parking issue. I think the engineers back there, so you probably would have to do some type of retention on the property and do a lot of different stuff that would come into play that wouldn't make any sense, whatsoever at that point.
you have 6 parking lots slatted for this, is that correct?
Yes, we try to do, you got the 2, like say, one for each bedroom and then one for our guest. So if each unit got somebody visiting, then it should be, we're trying to make sure it's enough parking, nobody's on the road or anything like that.
Currently, on the apartment complex adjacent to it, is that open parking? I mean, do you know if that's slotted for people that are just readily available to be parked there, or is there enforcement involved?
Of the apartments that's behind there, I'm not sure how they do it. When I look back there, I just see an open parking lot. I'm not
Okay.
sure if they,
Private property.
It's, yeah, okay.
no, we're not gonna try to use their parking lot.
Do you anticipate that this is going to increase foot traffic in the area along Pearl Street or Ellington Street?
I mean, I other than maybe 3 or 4 cars whenever they move, I don't think it'll be anything real noticeable to anybody. Because like I said, even when they on this lot, when they're coming off of Ellington and getting onto Pearl Street, there's a stop sign right there. So I don't see it adding a major effect to any of the community around it.
Would you be willing to install a sidewalk as part of the plan, site plan, to accommodate? Because I know that's a huge issue going up and down Pearl Street is pedestrian.
You talking about along Ellington Street?
Both, really, I guess, because if you're gonna have people walking up toward SFA or toward the commercial zoning, or up north and south transiting along Pearl Street, I don't think there's sidewalks on either of those streets, are there?
I mean, I just see people walking in the yard.
I think we can have a discussion about the walkability and foot traffic in that area. I think we have Mr. Bartlett, our city engineer, in the room. When we're talking about imposing conditions on a zone change for approval, it's important that we're making recommendations for conditions that mitigate any kind of adverse impacts, and then looking at, kind of the surrounding development and what's planned for the future. And so I'd love to hear Mr. Bartlett's thoughts on like other sidewalks that are planned, because those areas are all developed out. So any sidewalk construction would be like with the redevelopment of that area. And I don't know if there's any other sidewalks planned, if you have a sidewalk going to nowhere kind of thing, you know what I mean?
It's gotta start somewhere.
Yes. Yes, that is correct. But I would love to get Mr. Bartlett's opinion on that, if you guys want to have a discussion or go down that road. At your leisure, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we don't have to get into the weeds on sidewalks. I'm just curious at what a developer and property owner would think about that, considering they're going to be adding to the foot traffic in there.
Yeah, I think a sidewalk is great. I just, we always, you hate when you see a sidewalk going to nowhere, especially when everything around it's already developed, so we just try to avoid that. And then looking at, okay, are you setting expectations for future sidewalks when it's not feasible because of other, challenges or physical constraints? So anytime we're looking at things like that, I always like to get our engineering opinion on the feasibility of that in the future too, so we can see if we are going to impose it or recommend it to council, is that something that we can achieve in the future as far as connecting that to North Street. But yeah, I think this area is in dire need of additional improvements for walkability.
Thank you, Mr. Ellsley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Woods like to see this.
You state your name.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add a quick comment. So we've looked many times at sidewalk and walkability along this particular road. It's got a lot of challenges, and I'll tell you one of the main reasons is there are areas where the right-of-way is at the back of curb. And there are areas where the right-of-way is just a few feet off the back of curb. So in those cases, it's going to require acquisition, which could lead to condemnation discussions as well, and because not everybody wants to give their land up for that. We've had many sidewalk projects where we always have opponents to the sidewalks, believe it or not. They just don't want the folks in front of their property. So yes, I think it's a great idea. I think there are some hurdles and constraints that would have to be considered. There's been discussions on widening the street. I'm not telling you we're widening the street, but I'm saying that's a discussion that would also need the planning of sidewalks to be coordinated with anything we would do to the street and traffic conditions. So absolutely great idea. I think there's a whole pile of things that have to be discussed logistically in order to implement sidewalks in some areas. That kind of half answer your question, I hope. So,
Yeah, but I'm just mainly interested in this lot and what the developer thinks. I don't really care about the rest of the street. We deal with that when Mr. Woods comes back to, or his son comes back to rezone or get a specific use permit,
Understood.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Woods, would you like to see this?
Yeah, Woods hadn't seen it.
Do we have anyone else that'd like to speak for or against? Yes.
Would you like to go ahead? No. Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Rao. I am the homeowner with my wife at 1911 Pearl Street. I have no notes, so we'll just wing it. From the time that we moved in, we bought the house in July of this past year. Serene Ann has been remodeling her house, and if you see the inside of this house, you would know she's not going to leave that house. It's very high quality. Everything she does with her property is. This thing is going to be looking directly over my back fence, directly into my yard, reducing my privacy, and I would not be okay with this if I didn't know how she conducts her business, along with Mario, the things that he's done further down Pearl Street, the things that he's built, the properties he managed, immaculate. I see him, and it's time and time again. Now, as far as it being, as the previous gentleman stated, about there being a issue with traffic, there's already so much traffic. There's people that walk through my yard all the time. That's just life. Time marches on. Eventually, all of these, I'd be surprised if in 50 years, there's no homes there. It's all going to be multifamily. We're moving into a renter's economy. This is just a fact. I mean, for whatever reason, that's debatable, but it's a renter's economy, and more people, especially in a college town, they're going to have to rent. They can afford to buy. A lot of people can afford to buy. So to put 4 units, or however many units it may be, overlooking my yard that will be of quality and rent it out with the owner in the front, I'm completely okay with that. And that directly affects me. And I wouldn't be saying that if I had any sliver of doubt that she would not conduct herself in a responsible way, find great tenants, and also, Mario being the property manager that he is, not let anybody in there that we necessarily don't want in there. But even if that's the case, which it won't be, the apartments behind there, we have so many problems from those apartments. So those apartments, all that foot traffic that comes right through there, comes from those apartments. 6 more people, 6 more spots will do nothing. If anything, it will increase my property value. I'm completely for that. But more importantly, this will make it to where more people can have housing, more affordable housing, without putting another, what is that, the Galleria Apartments, what is that behind us? That. And then further down, Bonita Creek Apartments. All of those apartment complexes, the cops are always there. Always. And as far as there being a sidewalk or something like that, great. But if not, it really doesn't make a difference. It's Pearl Street. I actually, whenever I first moved in, I asked them to install if it was possible to install a speed bump. Because when me and my wife plan to have kids, I can't have them out in front because, as they told me, the police department, which I completely understand now, it is an emergency route. They call it the vein of Nacogdoches, or one of the two. So they all go down that, emergency vehicles, right? Well, that's not good. This one thing is not going to make a difference as far as how Pearl currently operates and has been operating for a long time. And as far as my neighbor to the north, Miss Bonnie, sweet lady, but she doesn't drive. So as far as traffic goes, it doesn't do anything. And her son Daryl doesn't drive either, and he lives with her. So that's full disclosure on that one. And as far as all the rental properties around, I understand what the previous gentlemen are stating about there possibly this being a domino effect. It's already there. All these houses are rented out, and supposedly they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be R1, right? Single family, and they're renting out to college kids. It's happening anyways. At least she's trying to do it the right way, and actually trying to get permits, actually trying to go through it through the correct protocol. So every time that I think about this, I think about I'm going to be losing some privacy in my backyard. I don't know if I like that, but I planted bamboo, 30 feet tall bamboo. Let's go, There's really no it's going to happen anyways. I'm glad somebody's doing it that is like her, like Mario, who conduct themselves in a responsible manner consistently. That's very important to me. And, things change. That's just how life goes. This is going to happen one day. I'd at least want them to be responsible about it. And say she sells it, right? Say she sells it right after she does this duplex. Well, she's going to have to sell the whole thing if it's for R4, if I'm right. She has to sell the whole thing. Now, developers, they're gonna come in, and that's a different story. But the things she's done to the inside of her house, she wouldn't just sell that to have it dozed. She'd make more money in the long run just renting out the back parts and keeping her house. Instead of one lump sum from a developer. Economically speaking, it just doesn't really make sense. So I don't see her doing that. And also, as my neighbor, she's just an all-around good person, and I would not be speaking up like this, losing my privacy, if I didn't think that she'd conduct herself in a positive manner. But do you have any questions as far as my privacy. All right, thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Please, come on.
I'm not gonna get to the point where we're beating a dead horse. I do wanna respond to a few things that I heard. When Milton was up here, I think what Milton was alluding to, and we've had this conversation, it's difficult, and I know it's difficult, for the city to monitor those owners that are renting in violation of an R1 zoning. And it does exist, and he's exactly right. They're college kids, and we know it. We know where they are. But I believe that's what Milton was referring to when he was talking about getting with the city and nothing being done. It's a difficult task. Who do you ask? You knock on the door and ask the renter, and, oh, no, it's just me and him. Or do you ask the owner? Does the owner have to own up to who are they renting to? So it's tough. I had to rent houses. I know it's tough. We didn't rent to anybody outside of an R1 zoning. So I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention when Mario was talking about R4 is right beside it, and it makes more sense to go to R1 to R4. Well, to me, it makes more sense to go to R1 to R2 because there's more properties within 1 digit of R2 than there are properties within 3 digits to R4. R4 seems extreme to me for what she wants to do if R2 would comply, because R4 opens it up to a whole different can of worms. As far as my comments about her residency, I don't know her well. The times I've met her, she's a very nice lady. I have all the faith in the world that her neighbor is correct. I talked to, was it Jay that did the renovations on your house? Oh, who was it that did all the renovations? He ran for city council, and
Jay Anderson?
it was Jay Anderson, wasn't it? I thought he renovated your house when he did the interior.
Renovate my house, remodel my house. His name is Ben, he's a designer.
Okay. Well, I was talking to Jay. He had heard that he, Jay Anderson.
Are you talking about Ben Sullivan?
Oh,
Yes.
he ran.
Yeah, yes, he did run.
That's it. I had the wrong name. I don't know where I was.
Ben Sullivan,
Ben,
who runs the cottage here in downtown.
Ben had the highest comments about her.
Okay.
And I believe him. So my attitude has no disrespect to you whatsoever. But it is not her permanent residence. Do you have a,
Two places, Texarkana, have a person here, have a.
but I know because you don't have your homestead. You didn't apply for your homestead for tax purposes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Woods, we don't speak into the microphone. They can't hear you on the recording.
Okay.
So just,
Okay.
it makes it hard to hear the
My point-
discussion.
My point was, she's not a permanent resident. This is not her primary residence. And it wasn't anything up against her, but the possibility, if you go to R4 and she sells, then the buyer has no limitation within the guidelines of R4. My main concern, I don't understand why going from R1 to R4. If you look at the apartment complex and somebody's already said it out loud, the cops are always there. They are. The complex is deteriorated. People don't want to live there because they don't maintain it, they don't take care of it, and it probably is about 50% occupied. And it's not college students, and it's mostly walking traffic. And he's right, the cops are there all the time. So this isn't gonna impact that because it's already there. I just don't want it to get worse. But I hope nothing that I said implied that I had any doubts about anybody's credibility or their worthiness. I certainly didn't intend that.
Sure.
It's just, I just still can't wrap my head around going from R1 to R4. And I would be opposed to R2, because if she leaves, that opens
Sure.
it up to whatever the new owner wants to do.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Elena, could you come up and,
Yes.
I'm trying to read it on my phone here, but I know you know all this stuff already, so you can just tell us. My understanding is R2 is still single family,
It is.
and then R3 would be like a duplex?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can you explain what type of development could go on this lot if it was R2 or R3?
So R2 is still single family. It just allows for a smaller lot. So R1 and R2, they're both single family zoning districts. They only allow for one single family dwelling per lot. R2 does allow for a more dense development style because it allows for smaller lots. R3 is duplex zoning. So it allows for similarly sized lots, but you can only have one duplex per lot still. So with the duplex zoning, if they were to keep that primary home, they couldn't build a new duplex because you can only have one duplex per lot. You can't have multiple structures on a lot. So R3 would not allow the applicant to keep the home and build a duplex on it. That flexibility is only found in our code under R4 zoning. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So clarifying, Elena, that means R2 cannot put the duplex on there as well.
Correct. R2 is single family. It's just a smaller lot size.
Okay.
I think there's some confusion because you hear R2 and you think, oh, that's, 2 residences, but R3 is the duplex zoning.
So the only option for this application is R4,
Yes,
okay,
essentially.
as it's written.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions?
Now, if he were to pursue an R3 zoning district, a duplex, he could build a duplex, but he would have to remove the existing structure in order to do that.
Or connect the two?
Potentially. He would still only be allowed to have 2 units, so
Yeah.
you're only gonna have 2 units on the lot.
Okay.
And so when an applicant does come in, you definitely sit down and you'd explain to them reasons for, if they're looking to do a particular zone change, you are talking to them and explaining, just for clarification for the public, that there are restrictions between all of these different designations, and this might be the best route to go or the only route to go,
Yeah.
in which they apply for and come here and speak about when they're
Yeah.
addressed.
So
addressing
we
PZ.
explain what those challenges are with each zoning district. We don't necessarily make a recommendation because we don't know what their business model is.
Sure.
We tell them if you decide to move forward with this construction type in the zoning district, here's what you're going to be required to do. If you choose this zoning district, you may get a reduction in standards, but you also have to do landscaping and buffering and things like that. So each category kind of has its own nuances as far as what is required and flexibility and things of that nature. So we explain all of that so they know what their options are, but we don't necessarily make a recommendation one way or the other for whatever they request.
Great. Thank you, Elena.
Any other questions? No? Anyone want to hear anything else from the applicant or owner or anyone? No? Okay.
Mr. Road also did you have a,
I had a question, but go ahead.
Did you want to come back up, Mr. Woods?
I have a question.
Come on back up.
thank you,
so-
Elena.
So the internet can hear what you have to say.
The first one was
Can,
split.
Mr. Woods, can you speak into the mic so people can hear you?
The first one was splitting the lot, when when it was the regulation board that they went before, that was splitting the lot?
They were proposing to subdivide the property under the R1 zoning.
Right. Is it feasible to do that method and put the back lot as a R2 so that the duplex could be built?
So R2 doesn't allow duplex, R3 allows duplex.
Okay.
And the applicant pursued a variance to subdivide the property under the R1, and that got denied. And so either way, a zone change would be needed to build a duplex on any portion of the property.
Okay, even though it's just one structure?
Correct.
I thought they were saying one structure could be built, even if it was a duplex in an R1 zone.
No. I think there's just some confusion about what's allowed in the different zoning districts.
Well, I understand that, I am confused. So a duplex requires an R4 zone?
No. So if it were zone duplex, he could build a duplex, but he would have to remove the existing home because a duplex only allows one.
Okay, that gets to my question. Could they split the lot and build the duplex on the back and leave the front lot R1 zone? Is that feasible?
So, excuse me, so to back up and give a little background, whenever this item came forward to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for variance a few months ago. The applicant was proposing to subdivide it, to cut it into two, because at that time, there was some interest in just zoning the back piece of it and keeping the front R1. That variance got denied, and so in response, you have this zone change before you. So the applicant has already kind of gone down that route to pursue subdividing the property, just zoning a portion of it. That failed, and so that's no longer an alternative for the applicant at this point.
I see.
I understand.
Okay.
I was confused about that because I was thinking, well, because I'm not necessarily so much opposed to the duplex being built in the back. My concern is everything that involves the front, and all of a sudden it's R4, and it's not her permanent residence. It could be that she would at some point in time sell it. That's still my concern. That's why I was hoping that if you could build a duplex on the backside, not affect the front, that would have been better for me.
Yeah, so I think initially the applicant was just trying to maintain the R1 zoning on the front, just trying to do the duplex zoning in the back, but when that variance failed to subdivide the property, this was that next step in the progress of that request.
Why was it denied?
Because they felt that the lot was too small in order to accommodate that. The proposed new property lines actually created an encroachment in the building setback for the existing structure, and the new lot was, didn't meet the minimum lot dimensions. So it was just slightly smaller. That's why they were requesting the variance. And so the board felt that it was not appropriate for the surrounding area, and that the better alternative was to pursue a zone change.
To get to the same place.
Well, so I don't think they actually said that they thought that, they didn't think that lot was large enough under the current zoning to accommodate that. And so in order to build what he wants to build, really, it's a zoning issue. It's not a dimensional issue. Does that make sense? So.
So just for future reference, should any citizen that owns the property should want to do the same thing, under what standards was it? I know you said that it was voted down, it just wasn't, but why? What specifically, technically, did not meet? That way, in the future, say if I choose to do it or somebody else in a similar situation chooses to do it, how do we, because it seems like it's coming full circle, as you mentioned, where we're still getting the duplex, but, you know, because that seems like an amicable thing right there. He gets what he wants, she gets to build that, I don't mind, but I'm kind of confused as to why exactly that was the case in the first place. Why would that be voted down? So in the future, we don't do the same thing.
I understand your question. I think the issue is that when you divide that lot, the backside then is you can sell it. They're two separate physical lots.
Right.
And so you can have different owners, and then they have to comply with setbacks from the neighboring lot for all kinds of reasons. Part of that, I think, is like fire, I'm assuming. We can ask Mr. Bartlett about that. But also just there's supposed to be a minimum amount of space between those. And if the lot is too small, the resulting lot, when you subdivide, it would be very awkward. It may hurt the overall marketability of either parcel going forward, because somebody may not want to buy the house because there's an encroachment maybe from the duplex in the back, or they're having to have an easement for their parking spots or something like that.
So if that's the case, so it would hurt her selling it in the future.
Yeah, it would hurt the quality of the lot for everybody going forward, is the idea, I think.
I don't understand.
So if I may just come full circle. So for this property, initially, the applicant wanted to just build a duplex on the back portion. The property is zoned single family. We don't know that requires a duplex zoning. They initially proposed just zoning a portion of it. We don't zone portions of property. You're not going to zone half of a lot, and so in order to move forward with that zone change, that would require a subdivision. The property is too small to subdivide the property under the current R1 zoning district, which would require variance. So R1, you have minimum lot dimensions, lot width, depth, size. The property was, it's oversized for that zoning district, but it wasn't large enough to actually create two lots and meet all of those dimensional standards, which is why they had to pursue a variance. That variance got denied because variance has certain criteria that they have to meet in order to get approved. That's a separate board. There's a separate approval criteria that they review whenever they're reviewing such requests. It's a little bit different than the zoning request, and they felt it's a very strict test that you have to comply with. Very few properties actually meet the test for a variance. Usually there's some sort of physical hardship that's unique to the property. Usually it's floodplain, right of way, some sort of something that's actually prohibiting any development on the property. And so that's some of the criteria that they use, which is, in effect is what they use whenever they denied the variance. Does that make sense? And so the response to that variance denial is this zone change, because R4 doesn't require you to subdivide the property in order to build another structure on it. It has that, grants that flexibility by right.
Sure.
Does that help clarify some of the, I think there's just some
Well,
confusion.
I understand it. I don't know
Okay.
if everyone else in the room does.
No, it was just, it's simply
Yeah.
anybody else like myself or anybody that would be watching this, the few people that do, if they have a similar question, I mean, it just seems like you're ending up at the same place, but just over some invisible line. And I understand that's zoning, that's how that works, but next to R4, next to these apartments built in the 70s, and it just seems like it's, well, they're being with that, it just seems like it's counterintuitive. You're doing it anyways, you know. But that's just how the cookie crumbles.
Well, thank
All right,
you.
Thank you all.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
All right, if there are no other comments, we're gonna close the public comments. Any discussion from? Any discussion from, on the commission?
I would like to say that I feel more comfortable seeing the plans drawn out. I do believe that the lot size is a little bit small, but I believe where it's actually located does allow for thoroughfare of traffic. I do agree that, and Mr. Milton, to address your concern, and also Mr. Wood about enforcement, you know, unfortunately, because of the shortage of staff or whatever reasons, we could not ever enforce that area of Pearl Street, which has now become a rental area, in which we all know, perhaps not be able to verify, but do know that college kids do reside there. And over the past decade, I've watched it become more of a rental area than more than a single-family neighborhood. And to that, I apologize to both of you for that, for the lack of oversight on what we could potentially do for y'all. But in the future, and now and present, there is a need for multifamily homes. There's a need for lower income homes for people that are graduating or that do want to move here. And so I believe that with the structure that was, the plans that were shown, and who designed her interior of house, which I know that does a phenomenal job, that she would have integrity, and perhaps what she would be building. I can't say that to be the truth, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard and from Mr. Rowe, that would be the case.
It seems to me that what we need is some sort of category in zoning for a transition area between an R4 and a single family, or something that allows us to go back when there's already been zoning existing and kind of accommodate changing demographics and changing uses. We don't have that. But given the plans here and the fact that this is supposed to be a, well, just practically, it's never going to be feasible to do anything other than very, something similar to what's already being done on the lot, or what's being proposed to be done by Mr. Wesley. That kind of, even though it's, if you rezone it to R4, that is true, anything R4 could be built there. From a practical perspective, because the lot is not very big, you're limited on what you can do. And I think even though maybe by law it's an R4, by use it's actually going to be more of a transitional property where you're going to have, to me, at least for the foreseeable future, probably a property, either two homes or a duplex and a home that's occupied by an owner or by potentially renters 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Or maybe somebody, much like the owner is right now, who purchases the property and uses the accessory or the duplex apartment for additional income. So it seems like it's going to, the risk of it turning into another massive apartment complex seems low, especially since there's two R4 lots just north on Ellington which are vacant. I think if there was a real concern about that, those ones would actually have something built on them right now, because that's big. You could put something pretty sizable there. That's my thoughts. Any other thoughts?
I would agree with you.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I appreciate what Mr. Wesley and the property owner want to do in enhancing the property. I agree there ought to be more affordable housing, more housing in the community. However, I do believe that there should be a high bar relative to zone changes. And the commission should approach that responsibility carefully. In the absence of support or in opposition should not be construed one way or the other.
Any other comments, Mr. Mills, or? No? Ruth? Carol? No? Okay, does anybody want to make a motion either for or against? This zone change?
I'll make a motion to deny the zone change.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to deny in a second. All those in favor of denial, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay. I'll go ahead then. That failed. I'll make a motion to approve the zone change from R1 single family to R4 multifamily as proposed under case file ZON 2022-05.
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, that carries. Thank you for your discussion and for all the involvement from everyone in the crowd this evening. Appreciate it. Moving on to a recap of city council decisions.
All right, Elena Helton, City Planner. So just to provide the Planning and Zoning Commission with an update on the items that were heard by City Council on May 17th. They did vote unanimously to approve the specific use permit for the accessory apartment at 504 North Mount Street. They also didn't take any action on the zone change for the planned development on Creek Bend Boulevard and postponed it to their next meeting in June after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And they did approve the zone change unanimously from R2 to R3 for the property on Dolph and Powers Street. Additionally, the neighborhood meeting for the Creek Bend subdivision is going to be held next week, Wednesday, June 1st at 5:30 at the Rec Center. And those notices have already gone out. We've already talked to a couple of the neighbors. And so we'll be there at 5:30 on Wednesday next week.
Thank
And
you.
it's you're welcome. And for that, I don't think I have any other items for you guys. We will have our regular meeting next month, and we'll have a work session to continue our educational series too. And that'll be the last scheduled work session, so we'll be asking for additional topics for the next series.
Elena, where are we at with DTJ?
Yes, so we actually had a comprehensive plan committee meeting and the downtown committee meeting last week, where they did some meeting in a box training with the committees and actually talked about this tool that is not meant to replace our public engagement, really meant to be a supplement for people who aren't comfortable coming to meetings, for people who aren't comfortable talking to staff, people to have kind of their own meeting. It could be with their local book club at the coffee shop, it can be in their living room, it can be with their church. Just another way to gather that public input. And we talked about our next steps. So we are planning on having a booth at the Blueberry Festival in June. So we're looking for volunteers for that. And we're going to be coming back and meeting again in July for the downtown committee. And then in June for the comp plan committee. And we're going to be talking about our existing conditions report. So that's that snapshot of the city and the community as far as existing conditions related to development, economic development, utilities, infrastructure, and to help inform that future decision-making recommendations when we're going forward and looking at the ways that we want to update the current comprehensive plan. And so we are going and blowing. We're hoping to take that report and present it to City Council in late summer, August. August is also when we're going to kick off some of our big public engagement initiatives, our two-day visioning event. We want to wait till the students until the students come back in town, so we can engage them. So as that information gets finalized, we'll push it out to the commission too, so you can push it out to your networks and help us get the word out. And we'll invite you to those meetings as well and make sure you're aware of the time, location, because you guys are a big part of that process.
Okay, quick question for you again. On Downtown Master Plan,
Yes.
the steering committee, they were talking about big events that DTJ was coming in, and Blueberry Festival to me, my question to you is, you get a lot of tourism that comes in, and so what is the point of asking in this community engagement at an event like this for your local residents and community on what they feel this town would look like for a comprehensive plan?
So we actually talked about some of our more local events, them coming and attending, including the Dias,
Dia de los Muertos.
thank you, I was going to butcher that name, and also the SFA Parents Weekend event and some of the other things where we know we're going to get more locals in town. I think there is some benefit to getting input from tourism because we are a huge tourism community.
Okay.
And I think it's important to get the perspective of people outside looking in,
Okay.
because sometimes you need someone to tell you your baby's ugly. But I think it's important to get that outside perspective, and so that way it's a 360 review. But we understand that does primarily draw tourists, and so there's not going to be a big focus for DTJ there. We are going to have staff there.
Okay.
But the larger focus is going to be on those more local events where we know we're going to have our neighbors there. That's who we're going to be talking to.
Does that count as one of the however many allotments of a community engagement they have proposed to us in the agreement?
Yes, so anytime that they're here in person, and we do try to piggyback that off of other events as much as we can, so try to get as much bang for our buck. So if we're having a two-day visioning event, we'll also try to coordinate that with another special event that's already going on, so we can make sure we get as much outreach and contact while they're here for that as well. But yes, it will.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No more questions for me.
All right, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, we are adjourned.